All right, welcome to Navigating Growth Podcast. I'm your host, Joel Calkins, and today I'm here with Jenny Rost of Construct Bookkeeping. Jenny, thank you so much for joining me today. Would you mind just starting off by telling everybody a little bit about who you are and what it is you do?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Joel. I really appreciate it. So, like you mentioned, Jenny with Construct Bookkeeping, we are a bookkeeping firm here in Washington that supports construction contractors in the Pacific Northwest with their bookkeeping, payroll, Department of Revenue, and compliance. We do a little bit of back office work for them as well. We've been in business for 5 years now, and I've been doing bookkeeping and accounting in the construction industry for 20 years now, which sounds crazy to say.
So you've been doing it for a while, but you've had this business for 5 years. So tell me a little bit about what you were doing before then and how you came about becoming your own business owner and what that's been like for you.
Okay, of course. So I grew up watching my dad. He owned a painting business. So I got to see firsthand like how overwhelming the financial aspect was for a small business owner. He's trying to juggle payroll taxes and paperwork and then stay on top of the field work as well. So that experience really stuck with me. And I spent 15 years in corporate construction accounting. So I got to see a lot of small contractors struggle with those same issues along with billing, insurance. And it was those things that really pushed me to start my firm. I wanted to bridge that gap between small business owners and being able to afford to have someone in-house full time and compete with those larger businesses. I always knew that I wanted to own my own business. I just didn't quite know what that was going to look like. I started off by getting my own finances in order because I didn't want to be advising people about their finances if I didn't feel comfortable about my own. So I started Dave Ramsey's debt payoff plan, and I worked on that for probably 2 years. And I got my husband and I in a really good position. I started my business with no debt, and I've continued to have no debt. I've been blessed to have no debt in my business over the last 5 years. So my husband and I were out to dinner one night, and I, of course, was talking about all my plans and wanting to have my own business. And he just told me, he's like, you just need to do it. Like you keep talking about it and you keep talking about it, so you need to do it. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. So I came up with a plan for this was February of 2020 was going to be the start of my business. And I was very excited. And of course, we all know what happened in March of 2020. And that actually COVID wasn't a setback for my business because I think it forced a lot of construction contractors who weren't used to working with a remote bookkeeper to become comfortable with things like Zoom and online portals and just working remotely because we were all forced to during that time. I was really lucky in that year. The company that I worked for, amazing company, they let me, well, they knew that I was starting my own business. I was very upfront with them about that a couple months in. And so they let me hire and train and work myself out of a position. And I know that not everyone is that blessed when
Yeah.
they go to start their own business. So I feel very lucky over the first year that I got to do that. It didn't mean it was an easy year. I did lose my mom during that first year of business. So that made, that first year even more challenging because of that. But I feel very lucky that the company I worked for was so understanding. So that has also like kept me passionate about having my team and how I, value my team and the type of culture that I'm building. So while I love serving my clients, I would say that one of the things I'm like most passionate or most proud of is how we empower women in our firm. So they get to work from home, they get to achieve financial independence, and they get to be present for their families. So their little kids see them, bringing in a paycheck, but also being able to get them off the bus or go to their, soccer match, things like that. So knowing that we're setting an example for the next generation is really like, that's a proud thing for me as a
Yeah.
business owner. I never thought I would have employees, let alone a team. So that's been an adjustment.
Oh, that is awesome. So first of all, congratulations on taking care of your own finances. I know that's very hard to do, and it probably gives you a level of empathy when you're working with your clients, right? Because not only are you helping them with the head knowledge that they need to be, have good finances, but you also understand kind of probably the emotions and sometimes maybe the guilt or shame that goes with like, hey, it's not very good. I'm a little bit embarrassed, but you get that. You can help them through that. So that's fantastic. Yeah,
Every client that comes to me, that's always something they're hesitant about is like letting me see inside their books. Like it feels like they're opening up something and there's no judgment. We've all been there. Money is funny. So
it is. It is. It's often the thing we don't want to talk about or let people know is not good. And so if they're probably coming to you, they've tried everything else. And so
exactly.
that's awesome that you have that level of care in what you do. I'm particularly interested in talking more about your leadership style because I think it's great that you have an environment where your employees, and it sounds like many of them are moms, are able to do the good work they enjoy doing, but also be able to do that and care for their family and other priorities. So tell me about why that's so important to you and what does that look like for them?
It's so important to me, I think, because when I was going through my mom's cancer diagnosis, I worked for a company, like I said, an amazing company, and I had the opportunity to work from home and have a lot of flexibility during such a time that was really hard for our family. And I want to make sure that anyone on my team who is going through, something that life changing or even smaller, that they're not worried about who's going to handle this thing while they're out of the office. I feel like leadership is something that, it's not really, there's not a lot of classes for it unless you're working with a coach. It's something it's hard to develop. So I'm still working on developing that. And I think my team appreciates the transparency that I give when I'm working with them. And I like to be open to their input because they're behind the scenes, they're doing so much of the work, and I need to be listening to what they're saying isn't working or their ideas, their thoughts. I've worked for bosses in the past who they weren't leaders, they weren't open to that type of opinion or criticism, and I take it as hard as it is. Sometimes I want to know, like, what can we do better? What are you seeing that I'm not seeing? Because there are some tasks that they have a very granular view of, and I have a super high level. So I need to know that. Plus, they might know of tools and tips and tricks that I'm not seeing, and I want to know that. So I really value my team members. And I just want them to have a culture where they enjoy coming to work. They have a work-life balance. That's really important to me.
Yeah, that is awesome. It's so easy as business owners to get caught up in what we want to have happen, and we forget that the people that are helping us get there also have their own dreams and aspirations. And so to understand that is really important. So it's awesome to hear that that's something that's top of mind for you. You mentioned earlier on, often when you work in the construction industry, so when they come to you and they decide, okay, I need a bookkeeper to help me, there's probably a lot of unraveling of what's going on within the finances. What are some of the things you see early on when you start to work with a client that you can immediately help them?
So usually it is a cleanup. That is probably one of the first things that I identify with clients. So we do a diagnostic review of a client's books when a lead first comes to us. So I will not work with clients who I don't get to do a diagnostic review of their books because your balance sheet rolls over year to year and your profit and loss is for the current year. We need to make sure that your books are accurate through the last filed tax return at minimum. If you want to have good data prior to that, that's an additional cleanup on top of it. But that is probably our first step, and our biggest step is to just make sure that those books are clean from the start. One of the biggest struggles that I see when a client comes to me is not putting aside enough for taxes. So that's one of the biggest issues, whether it is their sales tax or their payroll tax. So I always recommend, here in Washington, we have our retail sales tax and our B&O, or business and occupancy tax. And if you are doing construction services in Washington for retail, I always recommend opening up a separate savings account and putting aside 10% of your retail revenue into that account to cover those sales tax that are a pass through tax. A lot of clients when they first start out with their business. And even if they're a seasoned business owner, if they're not paying attention to their income, really accurately every month, they're not going to have that money set aside for that liability. Same goes with payroll taxes. So we partnered with Gusto when I very first opened my firm, because I liked that Gusto, when you process payroll that day, they not only, take out the direct deposit for your employees and pay them, they also draft the amount of your payroll taxes. And then Gusto holds on to that and then pays it based on your filing schedule. And I really liked that from a cash flow perspective for our clients, because construction contractors, they're all moving fast and they're not paying attention to those liability accounts. So it's nice that that money is taken out and they don't have to think about it, that month or that quarter. QuickBooks Online just made that same change in July. And so they're doing that now too, but I do not recommend QuickBooks Online payroll. So I prefer to use Gusto for that.
Okay. Because you brought it up, you mentioned QuickBooks, mentioned Gusto. If I were, let's say, starting a new business, presumably in the construction industry, but maybe I've been in business and I haven't really thought about the tools I need to do a good job of managing my finances and even managing my payroll, what do you recommend as a new person starting in the business world? What are those pieces of software or systems I should be looking at as I get started?
Absolutely. So, of course, we do use QuickBooks Online. So, I know I kind of poo-pooed the QuickBooks payroll, but we do use QuickBooks Online. So, I recommend that for all of our clients. It's well-known app for your phone. Everyone uses it. There's a lot of tutorials out there. So, that's a great tool. A couple of programs that integrate with QuickBooks Online really easily that add some additional features. We really love Dext. That is a document management program or a receipt management program. It's really great. You as the business owner or anyone in your office or field can have an app on their phone or desktop app, and you can easily scan or upload bills, receipts, any documents like that. And then we can communicate in that portal about job site specific information, bill information for those vendors, and it scans that document. So there's not a lot of data entry when it comes to that. Adaptive is a newer tool that's out, and it does some similar things to Dext in that it has that document management capability, but they are really changing. I would say they're changing the market with Adaptive. It's a really powerful tool because it incorporates more job costing and budget forecasting capabilities than some of the other software. It's really easy to use, very intuitive. We're liking that. A lot of our clients really love that. If you're looking for something a lot more robust that's going to have job costing, scheduling, vendor portals, things like that, something like JobTread or Buildertrend are great tools. We're very familiar with those and use those with a lot of our clients. So I don't stick to one tech stack. I like to allow my clients to be able to choose what works well for them and have that kind of flexibility, as long as it's one that I've vetted and I know it is a good tool and integrates well with QuickBooks Online. So there's a lot out there for the construction industry. I would just say, make sure you get a good implementation team, because that's probably the biggest part, is that setup there at the beginning.
So yeah, I imagine if you're starting a new company or maybe you've been in it for a while, you get into the because you are, let's say you're good on the construction side of it, whether you're, let's say, a contractor or a plumber, an electrician, or a roofer or what have you. But maybe you're not as aware of all of the business elements out there, the business tools, the finances, and often what I have found is a lot of them, they want somebody to take care of that and they know it has to be done, but they want to focus on doing the work or growing the business. When I think of growing, it's like selling and getting more clients and things like that. So if they were to come to you and they said, okay, Jenny, I understand I need a bookkeeper. It sounds like there's a lot of good tools to help me manage my finances, my accounts payable, my accounts receivable. You just mentioned a handful of tools. How would they go about, or do they start with you, or would they find somebody else like an implementation team? Like, how do they get started?
So we price out implementation a little bit different. It would depend on if they came to us and they already had that software or not. I would refer them over. I have a couple of sales reps at various programs like Adaptive and JobTread. So I would refer them over to one of the reps that I work with, and they would be given an implementation team with that software. If they wanted us to be involved in that implementation, we're happy to do that. I feel like you get the best implementation. It's most successful when we're able to work with that implementation team, because the implementation team, they're always great, but sometimes they don't know a lot of the specifics with bookkeeping. They're more trained in that sales and how their product works. Whereas we have a set chart of accounts that we like to work with, and we know each industry a little bit better as far as, like you're saying, if they're a roofer, if they're a painter, things like that, that might be a little bit unique to their industry. So we will partner with their implementation team. We don't need to be on all of the calls and fully involved in the implementation, but there are some specifics that we want to look over during that implementation. I would say it is best to find a bookkeeper first, because they're going to be honest with you about what products they're comfortable working in and what products can help solve those problems that you're looking to solve. Because I know that there's a couple programs out there I wouldn't work with or I wouldn't recommend, or there's some that are better for, maybe a roofer versus someone who does landscaping, things like that. So I would pick your bookkeeper first and then have a discussion about the needs, and then go from there on solving that issue for what tools to implement.
And I imagine that would be helpful too, because again, as you're trying to build out your systems as a business, different businesses, depending on maybe their specialty, maybe their level of maturity in terms of business cycle and where they are in their growth curve, have different needs. And I would imagine because you have a good understanding of their finances, you can help advise this is going to be helpful for you for where you want to go next, whereas maybe don't invest in this yet because you're not going to be able to leverage it like you should. Is that an accurate statement?
It is, and nothing against any of the implementation or sales
Yeah.
teams, but they're there to sell you a
Yep.
product. And of course, they want you to use their product. And we've all been through implementations that haven't gone well because it didn't fully meet the needs of the client. And so I'm going to give you more of an unbiased, I'm not trying to sell you a product opinion.
And you said something in that, and I'm gonna call it out because I think that's really important for people to understand. One of the probably the services you provide, whether you say this explicitly or not, is understanding what their needs really are and coming up with the right solution versus saying, I have a solution, now I'm gonna figure out how to take your need and make my solution fit. Because I think a lot of people, whether it's in their finances or this happens a lot in even growth, a lot of growing and expanding a business is I want to invest in something, therefore I'm going to force something into it because it looks cool or shiny or neat. And it may not be the right thing for their business. So it's good to hear you say that. So if you didn't say it explicitly, I'm going to say that. Understand what exactly you're trying to accomplish in your business. Have people like yourself help you figure that out so that you actually solve it in the right way and not just buy something that maybe doesn't do it.
So true.
So question for you, as you work with different clients, you probably see the same mistakes again and again and again. What are maybe the top 3 to 5 mistakes that you see business owners do when it comes to their finances and their bookkeeping? And what are maybe some of the things they need to be aware of?
So ways that I can tell if, they're making mistakes or things are not going well for them. The first thing, from just looking at their books, that perspective, is have their books been reconciled? So if you are in your QuickBooks file, you can go on the left-hand toolbar, go to Accounting, Books Review, Account Reconciliation. And if your books have not been reconciled, whether it's you as the owner that's doing the bookkeeping or you've been outsourcing, that is a great way to see if your books are accurate. Because if you are not taking your QuickBooks file and going back to your one true source, which would be your bank, credit card, and loan statements, you can't verify that what's in your QuickBooks file is accurate if you haven't reconciled those accounts. So that's probably one of the most common things that I see when clients come to us that is a red flag for us. The second thing I would say is kind of when their business might be in trouble. There's two key reports to look at. So the profit and loss by month, it's probably my favorite report. I love looking at that report, and easy to find in QuickBooks. Just go to the reports, search profit and loss by month. But the net income down at the bottom of that report, if you are seeing a loss month over month, that's a big problem. Obviously, none of us want to see a loss in our business unless you have some very specific tax strategy that you're going for there, but you don't want to see that reoccurring loss month over month, especially year over year. Another thing, if you are looking at your balance sheet, if you continue to see rising debt or credit card balances, or the inability to pay payroll, that's also a red flag. So how we would best help clients to navigate that, I would always recommend creating a budget. That's going to be the best way to make sure that you aren't spending more than you earn, because a lot of the times, especially in construction, it's really hard to see unless you're paying very close attention to detail if you are spending more than you earn, because you might be getting a large deposit in one month for a project, and the materials aren't coming out that month. They're coming out another month, 2 to 3 months later. And so it's hard to see, are you actually making money in that month? Job costing also really helps to dial that in by project. So those are areas where we're able to help those clients with those red flags or things that they might not know are troublesome yet.
Yeah, absolutely. So you said some scary things like month over month loss in terms of revenue and budget and taxes. And I know for many business owners, they have a team, whether they realize they have a team or not. And that can consist of yourself. They probably have a CPA, maybe a business attorney, maybe a financial advisor, but they've got people that they're working with. They're probably trying to, juggle, and all of them are there to help in some way with their business. So how would I think about a bookkeeper in terms of playing a role on that team? How do you interact with some of those players? What does that look like?
Love when we have a team that wants to interact. That's my favorite, because it's hard to work with a CPA who just wants reports at the end of the year. So you're going to be more successful when we actually operate as a team. So we had a newer client recently, and we got together, all of us, the whole financial team, and did a meeting. And we were able to align on a lot of aspects as far as like their assets, payroll, some tax strategy. But we realized that their legal team actually was where this question and this answer needed to happen. And by all of us getting together in that room, we wouldn't have known that that was actually a legal item that needed to be handled. We could have gone on without that meeting and assumed that it fell in someone else's lap, and it didn't. So we were able to get together and possibly save some costly assumptions there by having that meeting. I think a lot of us too, we will assume what our clients' goals are based on the role that we play, in their business. So a lot of the times I'm focusing on day to day and their processes and the tools that they're using, and of course, their transactions and their financial reports. But that's what's important to me. And that might not be what is most important to the client. So if you can meet once a year with that financial team, I think that's great. That's great, beginning of the year, especially to come up with a plan for the upcoming year. If not, especially before tax time, you're going to be a little bit more retroactive at that point. But having a team that's willing to get together and talk things out with our clients' books, we keep them up to date within a week. So every week we categorize transactions. We're not doing that on a monthly basis. So at any point, our clients can run their financials and they're having pretty up-to-date, accurate information. If we were to have a meeting coming up with, all the players on the team, we would want to have reconciled reports to be able to review. We do a QC review monthly of our clients' books. And so I'd like to, if it's middle of August, I want to be looking at July books that have been reconciled and QC'd. But I think it's really comes down to communication and having that meeting. And if your team isn't willing to do that, it might be time to have some more conversations with them and open those doors.
Yeah, and I can imagine that could take a weight off that business owner who's already got enough to worry about. Because if the team is talking, they're all working together in your best interest, making sure that everything is where it needs to be. And if they're not all working together, then it's going to be on you as a business owner to keep all of those pieces together and then translate, which is again more work for you and probably not the work you want to be doing. And so that's a great call out. I think as we as business owners think about how we manage our business, the team that we bring along, it's not just our employees, it's the people that kind of surround us, those other stakeholders. And so that's a really good word. One of the things that I also think about when it comes to finances and bookkeeping is often when I work with clients, when they think of growing, it means I need to sell more, I need to market more, I need to advertise more. And really, there's so much gold to be found in understanding your finances because that's really good data to help you understand what's working and what's not working and where maybe the opportunities are. How could you, as a bookkeeper, help business owners think about growing their business?
So with that, I mean, there's so many opportunities there. First of all, getting bookkeeping off of your plate. If you are the one who is doing the bookkeeping, getting that off your plate. You might be, maybe you're not doing it and you need to be. That's one thing. But if you're spending time every month doing your bookkeeping, running payroll, researching some HR questions, that's time that you could be using to grow your business. So I always talk about that in BNI that, if you're talking to a business owner who says, I don't really have time to make it to that networking event. Well, I could be doing their bookkeeping and freeing up 4 hours, 5 hours a month, and then they could be making it to that networking event where they're going to get those referrals and they're going to be able to grow their business. A lot of the times with processes and software as well, I know we talked about software a little bit, but process improvement, that business owner might not realize that they have a really manual process that is limiting someone on their team from doing what they're really good at, or even themselves, if they're stuck in this manual process that I could streamline with a tool that I already know I've implemented for other firms or other clients that works well. It could free up a lot of their time for that growth. We also help identifying, trends and issues in their books on a regular basis, so they have potential for growth there. Having accurate financial statements makes you stronger when it goes to applying for a loan or working with any banking institution. So that's another area of growth potential. We also do AR and AP management, like you mentioned, and so that allows you to have stronger vendor relations and client relations if your payables and receivables are more timely.
Absolutely. It's a great way to help, yeah, kind of manage that. I know so many business owners that I've spoken with that save bookkeeping and payroll till 10 p.m. on a Friday night because that's all the time they have to deal with it. So to think about not having to deal with it at that time and having somebody else take care of that is a huge benefit. Jenny, this has been so good, but I got one more question before we wrap up here. Now, and you mentioned this in prior conversations, AI is everywhere. Obviously, it's getting integrated into everything. So what does that look like for the bookkeeping industry? What do you think is going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years? One, what's going to happen in the bookkeeping industry? Two, how does AI play a role in that? Or maybe what are some of maybe the good things that might come of it, and what are maybe the concerns that we should be aware of?
Okay. So funny story about that. I was on a webinar for a new software that's coming out that's supposedly going to replace QuickBooks Online and some of the transactional and reconciliation level work that like me and my team do. So I asked live during this webinar, what happens if a client wants to leave my firm? What happens to their data? Because this isn't a QuickBooks Online program. And a lot of, bookkeepers and CPAs, we use QuickBooks Online, so that data is easily transferable. Well, with this software, if a client was to leave me, they would get a CSV file of all of their data. Could you imagine at your end if you brought a CSV file of all of your transactions to your CPA? what would happen. So when I asked that question, I was told that they think their product is so good that clients will be happy and they won't want to leave. So I felt like that was a very short-sighted answer from an AI tech company. So I'm excited about the opportunities that AI is bringing forward for automation and time saving, but over the next 5 to 10 years, I don't think that AI is going to be replacing any bookkeepers. I mean, we can't even get QuickBooks Online rules to work regularly, let alone them coding transactions or reconciling your books automatically. I think that the bookkeeper's role is really going to shift more into an advisory role. We were planning on adding advisory services in 2026, and I think that the technology is just going to help with that for automation. We do use AI in our firm right now, but we have very strict guidelines on that. So we're never taking client financial data and uploading that to any AI software. We use it more for brainstorming ideas, meeting formats, things like that. With AI, the data privacy is probably the biggest concern right now. We don't know where that data is going. No one knows yet. It's been so fast moving with AI that no one can answer these questions yet. So I really want to caution everyone on just uploading your financial information into these AI software, because we don't know yet what they're taking that data and what they're learning from it, what they're using it for. And a lot of that, like, that's your bank information, that's your employees' information. You have to be very cautious with that. So as much as I'm excited about the new developments, I am a little concerned. But at the end of the day, technology, like we've said, it's just a tool. It's not going to replace that human element. So that knowledge, judgment, ethical standpoint, that's still going to remain irreplaceable. I'm still the person who answers the phone when my clients call. I haven't replaced that with anyone. And I think that's something they really value about working with us. They have easy access, easy communication to us. And I know that AI can't replace that.
Yeah. Yeah, and so much of what you do, I imagine, which a lot of, professional service teams do, is they provide a lot of the outsourcing and, like you said, the advisory side of things. So it's not just doing the work itself, but actually getting things off of their plate, building new habits, building good systems so that they're actually a more profitable, healthy company because they're actually leveraging people that know that area of expertise as opposed to them trying to do it themselves or just relying on a piece of software that they don't understand to do
Yeah,
it too. So
absolutely.
the other interesting thing, and I think this is a good call for any time we use software, which is understand the privacy policies around that software, especially for financial data, for personal information, because some will sell it, some will use it to train their algorithms, while others don't. And so understanding what you're doing with it and who's holding it is really important. So definitely a good call out there. Well, Jenny, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for your time. I do appreciate it. Again, this is Joel Calkins with the Navigating Growth podcast. I'm here with Jenny Rost of Construct Bookkeeping. Jenny, thank you so much.
Thanks for your time, Joel. I appreciate it.
Of course.
It was great.